Okay, the first one was a 45, 45, 90. That means if this is a 90-degree angle, what is this? 45. And what's this? What does that tell me about these two sides? They're the same thing. Because if 45 and 45 are the same thing, then these two legs have to be the same thing. So for this case, let's say that this is x and this is x. X and x, they both have to be the same thing, right? Okay, if it is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and this is x and this is x because they're the same thing, the hypotenuse is always going to be x, whatever that was, x square root of 2.
Oh boy.
X square root of 2. Okay, now I want you to look at this note taker. The front is talking about 45, 45, 90 triangles. They have a special relationship. If the leg is x and the hypotenuse is x squared root of 2, that's what we just did. This is going to serve as our cheat sheet. You know how I like to give cheat sheets? You didn't get one of the green ones? It's up there. Okay, it's up there too. Alright, example 1. Here's example 1. Suppose an isosceles right triangle. Isosceles. That means that these two legs are the same. If it's a right triangle and it's isosceles, the only other option is 45, 45. So if it tells you it's a right triangle, then I know 90 degrees are taken. How many degrees are left? 90, which splits down to 45 and 45. So, example 1. Suppose an isosceles right triangle has legs with a length of 3. So let's draw a right triangle. This is 90, and I'm going to draw rainbow and rainbow because they're the same thing. If this is 3 and this is 3, what's my hypotenuse? 3 what? 3 square root of 2. Now, would you get the same thing if you did a squared plus b squared equals c squared? Yes. Yes, yeah, but that's the thing about this. These have a special relationship. If you know this is 45, 45, 90, and you know the legs, then don't waste your time. The hypotenuse is just 3 square root of 2. Okay? Let's do another one. Example 2. Suppose an isosceles right triangle has a hypotenuse of 9. Okay, draw a right triangle. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. The hypotenuse is 9, right? And I want to find out what x is. Hypotenuse is 9, but I want to find out what x is. Okay, up here in this corner on your green sheet, let's write this. If you know what the hypotenuse is, isn't the hypotenuse equal to x square root of 2? The hypotenuse is equal to x square root of 2. Well, what if I wanted to find out what x is? How do I solve for x right here? Divide by the square root of 2. So if we want to solve for x, you need to divide by the square root of 2. So if you have the hypotenuse, but you want to find x, just divide your hypotenuse by the square root of 2. Keep this formula.
Are we able to use this on our test?
Probably not. Okay, do I know the hypotenuse? Do I know the hypotenuse? Do I want to find x? So I need to divide the hypotenuse by the square root of 2. So here's your hypotenuse. 9 divided by the square root of 2 is going to give me what x is. How many of you remember rationalizing the denominator? Okay, this is what it's called. Pay attention. If you have a square root in the denominator, you cannot leave it like that. You cannot leave a square root in the denominator. So what we do to get rid of it is called rationalizing it. What we do is we need to multiply the bottom and the top by the same thing. Multiply the bottom and the top by the same thing. So just look at the top. What is 9 times the square root of 2? What's 9 times the square root of 2? 9 square root of 2, right? Okay, what's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? Square root of 4. What's the square root of 4? 2. So right here, when you're rationalizing it, you're multiplying these together. Some of you are not going to know what we're doing because you're not paying attention. So I'm about to call your name out and just have your phone up here for the rest of the period. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. 2 times 2, square root of 4. Well, the square root of 4 is 2. So this is simplified in fraction form, but you could also say 4.5 square root of 2. So that is what x is, here and here. Okay, well, let's pretend we don't know this is 9. Let's pretend we don't know this is 9, but we know x is 4.5 square root of 2, or 9 over 2 square root of 2. What do we need to do to find what the hypotenuse is? Just multiply that by what? Square root of 2. So if we know that x is this, and I multiplied 9 over 2 square root of 2 times square root of 2, you don't have to write this down. I'm just showing you how you can work backwards. What's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? Square root of?
4.
Which is?
2.
What's 2 times 9?
18.
18 divided by 2.
9.
Did I get the same thing? Okay, this is going to take lots of practice. Let's do number 1. Best case scenario for you, best case scenario is that you know what the leg is. Because if we know what the leg is, all we have to do is multiply it by, for which right triangle? 45, 45, 90. So right here in number 1, example number 1, I know that the leg is 8. 45, 45, 90. The leg is 8. What's the hypotenuse? 8 square root of 2.
That's it?
Yes.
Why do I have to do all the math over here?
Because that's when we know the hypotenuse. Best case scenario is when we know the leg. Let's go through all these and see if we know the leg. Do we know the leg for number 2? No. Hypotenuse is across from the 90. Do we know the leg for number 3? What?
Yeah.
Wait, which one's a leg? I'm confused.
Leg is not hypotenuse.
Which one's a hypotenuse?
Hypotenuse is the one across from 90 degrees. So we know the leg for number 3, right? So to find the hypotenuse, all we do is multiply it by square root of 2. So what's the answer to number 3? 4 square root of 2. That's if you know the leg. It's harder if you know the hypotenuse. Okay, number 4. Do I know the leg or hypotenuse? We're skipping. I'm trying just to find the easy ones. Okay? I know hypotenuse. What do I know here? I know the hypotenuse. What do I know here? Hypotenuse. So those are going to take a little more work. These were easy because we knew the leg. So if I know the hypotenuse and I'm finding x, what do I divide the hypotenuse by? Square root of 2. So let's do it. 3 divided by the square root of 2, or 3 square root of 2, because that's what I'm given. I'm using h over square root of 2 equals x. This is the formula I'm using. hypotenuse divided by the square root of 2 will give me these legs. Well, what happens right here?
It cancels.
So what's the leg? Does that make sense? Because if the leg's 3, what's the hypotenuse?
3 square root of 2.
Wait, so can we just say 3 automatically?
Yes, if you see that, you can.
So root 2x is 3.
See what?
2x is 3.
Yes.
Like 4 in the square root. So if it shows you that.
If you see the square root of 2. Look at number 6. Look at 6. What's the hypotenuse? 24 square root of 2. Well, isn't the hypotenuse always just x times the square root of 2? So what's x here? Okay, that's...
We can do that on our test?
That's second best scenario. First best scenario is we know the leg. Second best scenario is that we know a number square root of 2. Third scenario is that we have the hypotenuse, but no square root of 2, so we really have to solve it. So here we're going to use our formula, h divided by the square root of 2 to find x. Well, here h is what? 18. So 18 divided by the square root of 2 equals x. Do I have a square root in the denominator? Do I have a square root in the denominator? I cannot leave it like that. So I have to do what? What's it called? That's what we're doing. What's the word for it? Rationalizing. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2. 18 times the square root of 2. 18 times the square root of 2 is just 18 times the square root of 2. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is? Square root of 4. What's the square root of 4? So this is just 18 divided by 2, which is 9 square root of 2. Okay. Okay, let me show you this trick. Let me show you this one. And this might help you. If I use this formula every time, aren't I going to have to rationalize the denominator every time? Okay, so let's rationalize it once and just be done. What's this? So to rationalize this, square root of 2 times the square root of 2, right? So to find x, h is on top, so h square root of 2. What's square root of 2 times the square root of 2? What's the square root of 4? So every time, just plug it into this and you'll be done. No, stick with this one.
I still got confused.
Okay, but then you don't have to memorize all this. You don't have to memorize all that.
Yeah, because you don't get to use the string sheet.
Memorize this. So to find x, let's try to use this one and see if it works. What is our hypotenuse? What's 18 divided by 2? 9. So what's our answer?
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah. How many of you are going to use this from now on?
Wait, so hold up.
Okay, so you know how we just did all this and y'all got confused?
Yeah.
Okay, if you use this formula now, what is our hypotenuse?
18.
What's 18 divided by 2? 9, and what's left? 9 squared, so square root of 2 has to stay there. So your answer is 9 square root of 2. Well, what was our answer when we did it the long way? Same thing. So all you have to do is divide it by 2. Okay, 5.
It would be 8.
If we know the hypotenuse, and we're using this formula right here, hypotenuse, square root of 2 divided by 2 gives me x. What's our hypotenuse?
8 squared.
8 square root of 2. Is this way easier?
That's 16 divided by 2.
All right, I want y'all to try 7, 8, and 9. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Draw it out. What's it supposed to look like? Here's 7. Yep. 45, 90. 90, 45, 45. Here's your hypotenuse. Find x.
We have to show work, so we just like did it for this we did.
What would you do to 12? And leave what on top? Heaven?
Oh, wait, we got.
David, y'all know what's going on?
Yes. Okay, I got number 1.
Oh, what? The board.
Come on, let's do number 7. Y'all said you knew what was going on. Let's go. Because y'all were the only ones on your phones playing pool.
Wait, alright, I made the statements. I have no clue what's going on.
Okay, come on. Let's do it up here.
Wait, do I need to come up there?
Yeah, come on. Hey, did you memorize your hypotenuse formula for 45, 45, 90? What's the hypotenuse formula for 45, 45, 90?
H equals X divided by.
If we know H, and we're finding X. If we know H and we're finding X.
What's H?
You would just do H through 2 over 2. So in number 7, your hypotenuse was 12.
Alright.
Okay, David, plug 12 into this formula.
Okay, will you check my
Wait,
work
so I
to make
got
sure?
for 12 for X?
No, plug in 12 for your hypotenuse.
Oh, wait, so I got an H over 12 over 12? H?
This is your H. This is your H. Plug in 12 for your H.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's right.
So,
Yes, for number 7. Yes, for number 7. What about number 8? I haven't checked it yet.
like that.
What's 12 divided by 2?
6?
Mm-hmm.
Alright. So 6 over 2?
Square root. No. What's 12 divided by 2 is 6. Yes. Yes.